Welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thrilled you've joined us today and truly appreciate your support. We're curious, where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect of Shadows. Dominic Vance never trusted coincidences. 15 years as a Navy SEAL and 7 running Phantom Security Solutions had taught him that patterns always revealed truth. So when he noticed the third missed call from his wife Brooke in as many days, he didn't dismiss it as job stress. The evening rain lashed against the windows of his downtown Seattle office as he scrolled through her text messages. All variations of the same theme. Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you. His operations director, Floyd Ramirez, knocked on the doorframe. Boss, team's ready for the Peterson briefing. Dominic nodded, pushing away from his mahogany desk. The wife canceling dinner again? Floyd asked, noticing the phone in Dominic's hand. Third time this week, Dominic replied, his voice neutral despite the storm brewing inside him. Trouble in paradise? The question hung in the air. Dominic had built his company from nothing after leaving the military, specializing in high-risk security operations for clients who valued discretion above all. His reputation was unassailable. Dominic Vance protected what was his and destroyed what threatened it. No exceptions, no hesitation. Paradise is for fools who don't see the snakes, Dominic said, pocketing his phone. Let's talk about the Peterson extraction. Hours later, Dominic arrived home to the sprawling lakeside property he'd purchased 3 years into his marriage to Brooke. The house lights were on, unusual for 11 p.m. He entered silently, as was his habit, and heard laughter from the kitchen. Brooke stood at the island counter, still in her hospital scrubs, talking animatedly on the phone. She hadn't heard him enter. He doesn't suspect a thing, she was saying, her voice playful. Don't worry, he's married to his work. I know. Soon, I promise. Dominic stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, his face impassive as he cataloged every word, every inflection. When she ended the call, he waited 30 seconds before deliberately making noise, shutting the front door with enough force to announce his presence. Dom. Brooke's face brightened when he entered the kitchen, her green eyes sparkling with a warmth that now seemed calculated. I didn't think you'd be home before midnight. He kissed her cheek, noting the unfamiliar cologne clinging to her skin. Meeting ended early. Who are you talking to? Oh, just Leslie about the hospital fundraiser. The lies slipped out effortlessly. Leslie Porter, her best friend and fellow surgeon at Seattle Memorial. Dominic nodded, pouring himself a whiskey. How's the cardiac unit? Busy, she said, turning away to rinse her mug in the sink. We had a triple bypass that ran long. Another lie. He'd already checked the hospital's surgery schedule, a habit from when they'd first started dating 5 years ago. Nope, bypass surgeries today. I'm going to shower, she said, brushing past him. Don't wait up. As she walked upstairs, Dominic sent a text to Xavier Wells, his chief of security operations, surveillance protocol Heimdall. Full spectrum. Priority 1. The response came seconds later. Understood. Starting tonight. Dominic sipped his whiskey, gazing out at the rain-slicked garden. He hadn't built an empire by being reactive. Whoever was threatening what was his would learn why his former SEAL team had nicknamed him the Architect, because he didn't just eliminate threats. He designed their destruction. Chapter 2. The Surgeon's Secret. Dominic studied the surveillance reports with clinical detachment. For 2 months, Xavier had documented Brooke's movements, communications, and discrepancies. The pattern was undeniable. Regular meetings with Dr. Liam Hargrove, chief of cardiology at Seattle Memorial, always in the same private room at the Elysian Hotel. She's careful, Xavier said, sliding another photo across Dominic's desk. But not careful enough. The image showed Brooke and Liam in the hotel parking garage, locked in an embrace. Dominic's expression remained unchanged. Emotion was a liability when planning a response. What do we know about him? Dominic asked, voice steady. Xavier opened a dossier. Liam Hargrove, 41, Harvard Medical School, divorced twice. Known for aggressive pursuit of female colleagues. Board memberships at 3 hospitals. Gambling habit he keeps hidden from a medical board. Financial situation, leverage to the hilt. Alimony to 2 ex-wives. Mortgage on a waterfront mansion. 3 luxury cars. He's keeping up appearances, but barely treading water. Dominic nodded. And his relationship with my wife. Based on intercepted messages, it's been ongoing for at least 4 months. They're careful in their communications, but the content is explicit. Dominic closed the file. Continue surveillance. I want everything. His finances, medical records, phone logs, social media. Find me leverage points. Already underway, Xavier confirmed. There's one more thing. He paused, uncharacteristically hesitant. Say it, Dominic commanded. Yesterday, Brooke visited an OB/GYN, not her regular doctor. Private practice in Bellevue. Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly, the only visible reaction. Confirm it. 3 days later, Brooke announced her pregnancy over dinner. Dominic watched her face carefully as she shared the news, noting the calculated enthusiasm, the practiced surprise. That's wonderful, he said, raising his water glass in a toast. How far along? About 8 weeks, she replied, relief evident in her smile. I wanted to be sure before telling you. Dominic did the mental calculation. 8 weeks ago, he'd been in Dubai for 12 days, securing a sheik's compound. The timing was deliberate. She thought he wouldn't notice. He smiled and took her hand across the table. I couldn't be happier. That night, as she slept, Dominic made a call from his home office. Preston, it's Dominic Vance. I need a consultation. Dr. Preston Walsh, the foremost expert in genetic testing in the Pacific Northwest, had been on retainer for phantom security for years. I assume this is confidential? Preston asked. Always, Dominic replied. I need comprehensive preparedness for a paternity verification. Non-invasive options first, but be ready for anything. May I ask why? Dominic's voice was ice. No. The following week, Brooke's mother Helena arrived from Boston, supposedly to help prepare for the baby. A former socialite with old money and older prejudices, Helena had never approved of Dominic despite his success. She found his military background crude and his security business unseemly. I still don't understand why Brooke couldn't marry within our circle, Helena complained to her daughter during lunch. Dominic, ostensibly working in his home office, listened through the security system he'd installed. Mother, please, Brooke sighed. Dominic has been good to me. Good to you financially, perhaps, Helena sniffed. But man with his background, well, does he even want children? He's thrilled about the baby, Brooke insisted. He's already talking about nursery designs. Another lie. Dominic had said nothing about nurseries. Well, I suppose we should be grateful for small mercies, Helena said. At least the child will have Davidson blood to balance out whatever he brings to the genetic table. Dominic smiled coldly. The pieces were aligning perfectly. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. As Brooke's pregnancy progressed, Dominic executed his plan with methodical precision. He became the model of an excited father-to-be, attending appointments, asking appropriate questions, even hosting a lavish dinner for Brooke's colleagues to celebrate the news. Dr. Liam Hargrove attended that dinner, maintaining a professional distance from Brooke while casting furtive glances at her growing belly. Dominic made a point of engaging him directly. Liam, Brooke speaks highly of your work in the cardiology department, he said, casually swirling his scotch. Liam's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your wife is one of our finest surgeons. Seattle Memorial is lucky to have her. Indeed, Dominic agreed. We're fortunate she took that fellowship instead of the one in Chicago. Otherwise, we might never have met. Liam stiffened slightly. Yes, well, sometimes fate intervenes. I don't believe in fate, Dominic replied, his tone pleasant but his eyes cold. I believe men make choices, and those choices have consequences. The cardiologist paled visibly before excusing himself. Later that night, after the guests had departed, Dominic received a text from Xavier. Hargrove made 3 calls to Brooke's private line tonight. She didn't answer. Good. The pressure was building. At 6 months, Brooke's OB/GYN suggested comprehensive genetic testing, citing Brooke's age of 37 as the reason. Dominic ensured he was present for the conversation. Is there any risk to the baby? He asked, playing his role perfectly. Minimal, the doctor assured them. It's a standard blood draw from Brooke that analyzes fetal DNA. We can screen for chromosomal abnormalities and even tell you the gender if you'd like to know. I'd prefer to wait on the gender, Brooke said quickly. But the testing sounds prudent. Dominic squeezed her hand supportively. Whatever you think is best, darling. 2 days after the test, Dominic received a call from Dr. Preston Walsh. I've secured the sample as requested, Preston confirmed. How would you like to proceed? Run the full panel against my DNA profile, Dominic instructed. I want preliminary results within 48 hours. Understood. And if the results confirm your suspicions? Then we move to phase 2, Dominic said. I'll need documentation that will stand up to legal scrutiny. The results arrived while Dominic was negotiating a security contract in Los Angeles. He opened Preston's encrypted message in his hotel room. Analysis confirms non-paternal event. 0% probability of biological relation. Full report ready upon your return. Dominic allowed himself exactly 5 minutes of white-hot rage before locking those emotions away. Anger clouded judgment, and he needed perfect clarity for what would come next. He called Xavier. Accelerate surveillance on Hargrove. I want pressure points, significant ones, and arrange a meeting with Tessa Monroe. Tessa Monroe was the most ruthless divorce attorney on the West Coast, known for leaving opposing parties financially and emotionally devastated. She'd been another card in Dominic's contingency deck, one he'd hoped never to play. When he returned to Seattle, Dominic maintained his facade flawlessly. He attended the baby shower, nodded appreciatively at tiny clothes, and endured Helena's thinly veiled insults with apparent good humor. The night before the gender reveal party, Brooke's idea, not his, he overheard another late-night call. You need to calm down, Brooke was whispering in the bathroom. The test results were routine. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Look, we agreed to wait until after the birth. Yes, I'm still committed to our plan. Dominic slipped back to bed before she emerged. When she curled against him, he embraced her, his mind calculating the final adjustments to his counterattack. The gender reveal party was scheduled at their lake house, with 30 guests including family, friends, and key hospital colleagues. Dominic had requested one special addition to the guest list, Dr. Preston Walsh, introduced as an old friend and business associate. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, Dominic observed Brooke and Liam maintaining their careful distance, communicating only through glances and brief, seemingly professional exchanges. Helena hovered near her daughter, periodically casting disapproving looks toward her son-in-law. Perfect. All the players were in position. The moment approached. Brooke stood beside the elaborate cake that would reveal blue or pink when cut. Dominic took his place next to her, knife in hand, smiling for the cameras. Before we cut, Helena announced, raising her champagne flute, I'd like to toast to my first grandchild, a Davidson through and through. To the baby, the guests echoed. Dominic noticed Preston positioning himself near the door, medical bag in hand. Right on schedule. As they prepared to cut the cake, Helena stepped closer, examining Brooke's profile. Her expression suddenly shifted. Something's not right, she murmured, her society manners momentarily forgotten. The facial structure, it reminds me of, she stopped abruptly, eyes darting to Liam across the room, then back to Brooke's pregnant form. The room quieted as Helena's face contorted with realization and rage. She gripped Brooke's arm, her voice carrying clearly through the silence. This baby can't be our blood. Everyone went quiet. Brooke looked confused. Dominic just smiled. Then the door opened, and Preston walked in, holding a manila envelope. Actually, Preston announced with clinical precision, there's something you need to know. Chapter 4. The test results. Actually, there's something you need to know, Dr. Preston Walsh stated, his clinical tone slicing through the stunned silence. All eyes turned to the distinguished geneticist as he approached Dominic and Brooke. Brooke's face drained of color. Who is this? What's happening? Dominic placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle, but his eyes hard as granite. This is Dr. Preston Walsh, dear, one of the country's leading experts in genetic testing. Helena stepped forward, champagne glass still clutched in her manicured hand. What is the meaning of this interruption? Preston held up the manila envelope. Mrs. Vance, I'm afraid there's an irregularity with your amniocentesis results that requires immediate attention. A murmur rippled through the gathered guests. Dominic scanned the room, noting Liam Hargrove's ashen face as the cardiologist backed slowly toward the terrace doors. This is absurd, Brooke protested, her voice rising with practiced indignation. My OB is on my test results. There are no irregularities. That's partially correct, Preston replied evenly. Your regular OB has the standard screening results. But the amniotic fluid was also sent to my specialized lab for advanced genetic mapping. Without my consent? Brooke's eyes flashed with genuine anger now. With the consent of the child's father, Preston countered, glancing at Dominic. Helena's grip tightened on her glass. What irregularity could possibly warrant this humiliating spectacle? Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Brooke suggested desperately. Why? Dominic asked, his voice unervingly calm. These are our closest friends and family. Surely we can trust them with important medical information about our child. Every emphasis on our was a dagger, and Brooke flinched visibly at each one. Preston opened the envelope and removed several documents. The testing revealed two significant findings. First, the child is male. A chorus of congratulatory murmurs began, but quickly died as Preston continued. Second, there is a 0% probability that Mr. Vance is the biological father. The room erupted. Helena gasped dramatically, clutching her pearls. Several guests began edging toward the exits. Brooke's friend, Leslie, covered her mouth in shock. That's impossible, Brooke whispered, though her eyes told a different story. There must be some mistake. Science doesn't make mistakes of this magnitude, Preston replied. We ran the analysis 3 times to confirm. The DNA profile shows the child carries markers consistent with Mediterranean genetic heritage. All eyes inadvertently shifted to Liam Hargrove, whose Italian ancestry was well known at the hospital. This is outrageous, Helena sputtered, suddenly protective of her daughter despite her earlier suspicion. Dominic, how could you orchestrate such a public humiliation? Dominic's expression remained impassive. Is it humiliation to seek the truth, Helena? I thought the Davidsons valued honesty above all. Don't you dare lecture me about values, Helena hissed. Not when you've turned what should be a joyous family occasion into this circus. A circus indeed, Dominic agreed, turning to face Brooke. Though I believe we're still missing one crucial performer. Dr. Hargrove, would you care to join us at the center ring? Liam froze halfway to the terrace door, trapped like prey in the gaze of a predator. This doesn't concern him, Brooke protested frantically. Doesn't it? Dominic asked softly. Dr. Walsh, would you please elaborate on the other genetic markers you identified? Preston nodded. The fetus carries several distinctive hereditary traits, including markers for a rare blood type, AB negative with a Bombay phenotype. Fascinating, Dominic mused. And how common is this blood type, doctor? Extremely rare. Approximately 1 in 5 million individuals. 1 in 5 million, Dominic repeated thoughtfully. And yet, by remarkable coincidence, our hospital's chief of cardiology has documented this exact blood type in his medical records. He turned to Liam. Isn't that correct, Dr. Hargrove? Liam's silence was damning. Brooke began to tremble visibly. You've been planning this, she accused Dominic, tears welling in her eyes. All of it. Planning. Dominic raised an eyebrow. I merely sought answers to questions raised by your behavior. The late-night calls, the hotel meetings, the convenient timing of the pregnancy while I was overseas. Brooke's tears stopped abruptly, her expression hardening. You had me follow? I had my wife protected, Dominic corrected her, as I do with all my valuable assets. The calculated coldness of his response sent a chill through the room. Even Helena seemed momentarily speechless. Liam finally stepped forward, his physician's instinct to protect overriding his fear. Brooke, don't say anything else. This is clearly a setup. Dominic smiled thinly. A setup requires deception. Doctor, have I presented anything but verifiable facts. You've presented selective information in the most damaging way possible, Liam countered, finding his courage. Yes, Brooke and I have been seeing each other. Yes, the child is mine. But your portrayal of Brooke as the villain here ignores the years of emotional neglect she's suffered while you built your precious security empire. How noble of you to defend her honor, Dominic replied, his tone dangerously soft. Tell me, when you were meeting my wife at the Elysian Hotel, were you planning to leave your gambling debts behind as well? Or were you hoping Brooke's inheritance would cover those too? Liam blanched. You don't know what you're talking about. $478,000 to underground poker games in the last 18 months. Another $350,000 to offshore sports betting sites. Your financial advisor has been quite worried about your aggressive investment strategy. The precision of these figures silenced Liam more effectively than any threat could have. Dominic turned back to the stunned guests. I apologize for the dramatic revelation. Please enjoy the refreshments while my wife, her lover, and I discuss the path forward. He gestured toward his home office. As the three moved toward the hallway, Helena recovered her voice. Brooke, don't go anywhere with him. We'll call our lawyers immediately. Dominic paused, addressing his mother-in-law with perfect courtesy. Helena, you're welcome to join us. In fact, I insist. As you said, this is a family matter. The four retreated to Dominic's office, leaving the party in disarray. Once inside, Dominic closed the door and activated a switch under his desk. A subtle hum indicated the room's soundproofing was now engaged. You calculating bastard, Brooke spat, all pretense abandoned. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. An interesting complaint from a woman carrying another man's child, Dominic replied, seating himself behind his desk. But then, hypocrisy has always been your specialty, hasn't it? Helena moved to stand protectively beside her daughter. Whatever Brooke has done, she doesn't deserve this barbaric treatment. We'll fight you in court. By all means, Dominic said, opening a drawer and removing a thick dossier. But before you engage your army of lawyers, you might want to review this. He slid the file across the desk. Liam reluctantly opened it, his face growing increasingly pale as he flipped through the pages. What is it? Brooke demanded. Documentation of your lover's gambling debts, Dominic explained, including his recent attempts to access restricted medication at the hospital for resale to cover those debts. Liam slammed the file shut. This is fabricated. You're trying to frame me. Am I? The DA doesn't think so. They've been building their own case for months. I merely accelerated their timeline. You're bluffing, Liam challenged, though his voice lacked conviction. Dominic doesn't bluff, Brooke said quietly, her anger giving way to fear. What do you want? Dominic steepled his fingers. Merely what's fair. A divorce with a settlement that acknowledges the magnitude of your betrayal. Dr. Hargrove will resign his position at Seattle Memorial and seek employment elsewhere, perhaps in a rural setting where his talents will be appreciated but temptations minimized. And if we refuse, Helena demanded, then the DEA receives my complete file on Dr. Hargrove tomorrow morning. Dominic replied simply. As for you, Brooke, I think the hospital board would be very interested in the evidence suggesting you helped facilitate Liam's access to those medications. That's a lie, Brooke exclaimed. Perhaps, Dominic conceded. But in matters of controlled substances, even the suggestion of impropriety is enough to suspend a medical license pending investigation. How long could you afford to fight that battle while pregnant? A year? 2. The room fell silent as the three considered their options against a man who had clearly anticipated their every possible move. You were never going to be a father to this child anyway, Brooke finally said, her voice breaking. You're incapable of love. Dominic's expression didn't change. On the contrary, I loved you completely, Brooke. So completely that I built contingencies for the day you proved unworthy of that love. He opened another drawer and removed 3 sets of documents. Divorce papers, already prepared. The terms are fair but non-negotiable. You expect us to sign these now. Helena was incredulous. Tonight would be ideal, Dominic confirmed. But I'll give you until tomorrow noon to review them with your lawyers. I wouldn't advise trying to improve the terms, however. Each hour past deadline, the settlement amount decreases by $1 million. Liam leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. Look, Dominic, this is between you and Brooke. Leave my career out of it. Your career was forfeit the moment you touched my wife, Dominic replied coldly. Consider my offer mercy compared to what the federal prosecutors would demand. The meeting concluded with Brooke, Liam, and Helena departing with copies of the divorce settlement. As Dominic escorted them out through the now-empty party venue, he noticed Xavier waiting discreetly by the front door. Ensure they reach their destinations safely, Dominic instructed, and increase surveillance for the next 24 hours. I want to know every call, every consultation, every consideration of options other than my terms. When they were gone, Dominic returned to his office and poured himself a rare second scotch. The first phase was complete. The divorce would proceed on his terms. Brooke would be financially secure, but socially diminished. Liam would be professionally crippled, but avoid prison. But this was merely the foundation of his response to their betrayal. The true architecture of his revenge was just beginning to take form. Chapter 5. The Price of Deception. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Dominic sat in the leather chair of his downtown penthouse, reviewing the weekly surveillance report on Brooke and Liam. They had relocated to Portland, where Liam had secured a position at a second-tier hospital with a substantial pay cut. Brooke remained on maternity leave, her career prospects dimming with each passing week. The door opened, and Tessa Monroe entered, impeccable in a charcoal suit. Your ex-wife's attorneys are making noise about revisiting the settlement, she announced without preamble. On what grounds? Dominic asked, not looking up from the report. They're claiming duress during the signing. Specifically, that your threats against Hargrove's medical license constituted illegal coercion. Dominic finally raised his eyes. And your response? That we have surveillance footage of Brooke's signature on prescription pads used for Hargrove's drug scheme. Inadmissible in court, perhaps, but devastating if leaked to the Oregon Medical Board. Did you explicitly threaten to leak it? Tessa's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile. I merely mentioned that our client values transparency in medical licensing matters. Her attorney got the message. Dominic nodded approvingly. Tessa's ruthlessness was why he kept her on a substantial retainer. Will they pursue it further? Doubtful. The Davidson family fortune isn't what it once was. Helen has been making inquiries about loans against her Boston property. This was news. Financial difficulties? Significant ones. The family trust took heavy losses in some unwise investments. Your divorce settlement was actually more generous than Brooke deserved, given their circumstances. Dominic made a mental note to have Xavier investigate these financial troubles more thoroughly. Not because he cared about Helena's plight, but because any vulnerability could be leveraged. What about the child? He asked, his tone neutral. Born 2 weeks ago. Healthy boy, 8 pounds 3 ounces. They've named him Alexander Hargrove. Dominic's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes. Not pain, but a cold calculation. And Hargrove's gambling resumed within 6 weeks of their relocation. He's already found a high-stakes game in Portland, currently down about $45,000. Predictable, Dominic murmured. And their relationship? Strained. 3 domestic disturbance calls to their apartment in the last month, though no charges filed. Dominic closed the surveillance file. Continue monitoring. I want to know the moment Hargrove's debts exceed $100,000. May I ask why that threshold is significant? Tessa inquired. Because men like Hargrove become truly desperate at 6 figures, Dominic explained. And desperate men make catastrophic decisions. After Tessa departed, Dominic moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's skyline. The city glittered below him, lights shimmering against the darkening sky. He had eliminated Brooke and Liam from his life, surgically, excising them with the precision they deserved. Yet something remained unfinished. His phone rang, Xavier's direct line. Sir, we've confirmed Hargrove's contact with Martin Sheen. Dominic's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Martin Sheen was a loan shark known for his unique collection methods when borrowers defaulted. His association with several organized crime families made him both dangerous and useful. How much? $150,000 at 40% interest, compounded weekly. Dominic allowed himself a small, cold smile. Sooner than I anticipated. Activate Protocol Ares. Already in motion, Xavier confirmed. The account is created and the trail is laid. Protocol Ares was the next phase of Dominic's architectural design, a complex financial trap that would ensnare both Liam and, by extension, Brooke. He had established an offshore account in Liam's name, untraceable to Dominic, and was gradually feeding it with funds that appeared to come from diverted hospital pharmaceuticals. The DEA would receive an anonymous tip about this account at precisely the right moment, creating a cascade of legal consequences that would destroy what remained of Liam's career and reputation. But first, Dominic needed Liam to implicate himself further, to take actions that would ensure his destruction was complete and irreversible. 2 weeks later, Xavier reported that Liam had missed his first payment to Sheen. 3 of Sheen's men had paid a visit to the Portland apartment, leaving Liam with a broken finger as a warning. Brooke had taken the baby to a hotel for the night. Her parents offered financial assistance. Dominic asked. Helena attempted to liquidate her remaining jewelry, but it covered less than half the interest due, Xavier reported. The Davidson fortune is virtually gone. Her husband's dementia care facility alone costs $15,000 monthly. Interesting. Dominic hadn't known about his former father-in-law's condition. Not that it changed anything. Sir, Xavier continued, hesitation evident in his voice. There's something else. Hargrove approached one of our former clients yesterday, Benjamin Weiss. Dominic stilled. Benjamin Weiss ran a private equity firm that had contracted Phantom Security for executive protection during a hostile takeover. The relationship had been profitable for both parties. What did Hargrove want? He claimed to have damaging information about you, specifically evidence of illegal surveillance operations conducted by Phantom Security. He offered to sell this information to Weiss, knowing your history. Dominic's eyes narrowed fractionally. Does he actually possess such evidence? Nothing substantial. Some recorded conversations with Brooke where you apparently mentioned surveillance capabilities. Nothing that would stand up to scrutiny. And Weiss's response? He strung Hargrove along, recorded the conversation, then contacted us immediately. He's awaiting your instruction on how to proceed. Dominic considered this development. Hargrove's desperate move presented both risk and opportunity. Tell Weiss to express interest. Schedule a meeting for next week. Have him request specific examples of the evidence Hargrove claims to possess. Should we prepare legal countermeasures? Xavier asked. Not yet. This plays perfectly into Protocol Ares. Dominic paused. What's Brooke's involvement in this? Unclear. Our surveillance indicates increasing conflict between them, primarily about money. She scheduled a job interview at Portland General next week. Ensure she gets the position, Dominic instructed. We need her financially independent enough to make choices, but not so secure that she can extract herself from Hargrove entirely. Xavier hesitated again. Sir, manipulating hospital hiring decisions is outside our usual. The chief of surgery owes me a favor from Kandahar, Dominic interrupted. Make the call. After hanging up, Dominic accessed his secure server and reviewed Protocol Ares. Each component was meticulously designed, each contingency accounted for. Hargrove's attempt to sell non-existent evidence was an unexpected gift. It provided the perfect justification for what would happen next. Dominic opened his safe and removed a small device resembling a flash drive. It contained specialized malware developed by Phantom Cyber Division, capable of penetrating most civilian security systems undetected. Tomorrow, it would find its way to Benjamin Weiss, who would ensure it was inserted into Hargrove's laptop during their meeting. From there, the architecture of destruction would build itself, floor by painstaking floor, until both Brooke and Liam were buried beneath its weight. Chapter 6. The Architect's Blueprint. The rooftop bar of Seattle's Columbia Tower offered unparalleled views of the city and absolute privacy for those willing to pay for it. Dominic sat at a corner table, waiting for Benjamin Weiss to arrive with news from the Portland meeting. The architect emerges from his fortress, came a familiar voice. Vincent Maddox, Dominic's former commanding officer and one of the few people he still considered a friend, approached with 2 glasses of scotch. "Vincent," Dominic acknowledged, accepting the drink. "I didn't realize you were back from Kiev." The older man slid into the chair opposite. "Wrapped up the security assessment yesterday. Your boys did good work on the embassy upgrades." Vincent studied Dominic's face with a keen observation that had kept him alive through 3 decades of special operations. "You look like a man executing a mission, not corporate acquisition season, so I'm guessing this is personal." Dominic didn't answer immediately, taking a measured sip of his scotch instead. Vincent was one of the few people who knew about Brooke's betrayal and the subsequent divorce. "You're still hunting them," Vincent observed. It wasn't a question. "Justice isn't revenge," Dominic replied evenly. "Bullshit," Vincent chuckled without humor. "I trained you, remember? I know the difference between a man seeking justice and one designing annihilation." He leaned forward. "The question is whether you've considered the collateral damage." Dominic's eyes hardened. "There won't be any." "No. What about the kid? He didn't ask to be born into this mess." "The child will be provided for," Dominic said dismissively. "My issue is with Brooke and Hargrove, not an innocent infant." Vincent nodded slowly. "Good, because crossing that line would make you something I didn't train you to be." Their conversation paused as Benjamin Weiss approached, his normally confident stride tentative as he neared their table. "Dominic," he greeted nervously. "Mr. Maddox." "Report," Dominic said simply. Benjamin sank into a chair. "The meeting went as planned. Hargrove is desperate, practically sweating financial panic. He tried to sell me evidence that consisted mainly of recorded conversations with your ex-wife where you supposedly mentioned surveillance operations. And the device, installed on his laptop during a bathroom break. Our tech confirmed it's operational and transmitting." Dominic nodded. "You did well. This concludes your involvement." "Actually," Benjamin hesitated. "There's a complication. Hargrove mentioned that he's been approached by someone else interested in information about you, someone from your past. He implied it was military-related." Dominic's expression didn't change, but Vincent straightened imperceptibly in his chair. "Did he give a name?" Vincent asked. "No, but he said this person offered substantial money for anything that could, quote, bring Vance down." After Benjamin departed, Vincent turned to Dominic. "Could be nothing. Could be Shaw." The name hung between them like a live grenade. Colonel Robert Shaw had commanded the ill-fated Operation Cerberus in Syria, where bad intelligence had led to civilian casualties. Dominic's testimony had ended Shaw's career and nearly resulted in criminal charges. "Shaw's been quiet for years," Dominic noted. "Men like Shaw don't forgive or forget," Vincent countered. "And using your ex-wife's lover as a proxy would be his style." Dominic considered this new variable in his calculations. If Shaw was involved, the risk parameters changed significantly. "I'll have Xavier look into it," he decided. "But Protocol Ares continues as planned." Vincent studied him carefully. "Just remember what I taught you about complex operations. The more moving parts, the more potential points of failure," Dominic recited. "I haven't forgotten. See that you don't. Because from where I'm sitting, you're building a house of cards in a hurricane." 3 days later, Dominic received confirmation that the malware was functioning perfectly. Every keystroke on Hargrove's laptop, every email, every web search was being monitored. The picture it painted was one of escalating desperation. Hargrove had taken additional loans from increasingly dangerous sources. He had begun selling prescription medications in earnest, using Brooke's access codes at Portland General without her knowledge. And most significantly, he had indeed been contacted by Robert Shaw. Xavier presented the intelligence in Dominic's office, his usual professional demeanor troubled. "Shaw has offered Hargrove $250,000 for actionable intelligence on Phantom Security's overseas operations. Specifically, our work in Yemen last year. The Yemen operation had been legitimate but highly classified security for American intelligence assets during a sensitive extraction. If details leaked, lives would be endangered. Has Hargrove provided anything substantive?" "Not yet. He's stringing Shaw along, promising evidence he doesn't have. But he's growing desperate enough to fabricate something convincing. Dominic walked to the window, considering the implications. Shaw's involvement changes the timeline. How close is the DEA to acting on our anonymous tips? They're building their case. Probably 2 more weeks before they move. Too long, Dominic decided. We accelerate to Phase 2 immediately. Phase 2 of Protocol Ares involved activating an agent Dominic had planted in Martin Sheen's organization months ago, anticipating Hargrove's eventual debt problems. This agent would suggest that Hargrove's medical knowledge made him valuable for certain specialized services that could clear his debt quickly. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Hargrove would be offered the opportunity to perform off-the-books medical procedures for Sheen's criminal associates. Once he agreed, evidence of his consent would be captured and preserved. Whether he actually performed such procedures was irrelevant. The mere agreement would be enough to destroy him professionally and personally. Meanwhile, the malware on Hargrove's laptop would be used to plant falsified communications with overseas contacts, making it appear he was selling medical information on Dominic's Yemen security clients. When these communications were discovered by federal authorities via another anonymous tip, Hargrove would face potential treason charges. What about Brooke? Xavier asked. Continue monitoring. When Hargrove is arrested, we'll ensure she receives evidence of his activities that put her medical license and her child at risk. Her revulsion will be genuine and complete. And if Shaw realizes his source is compromised. Dominic's expression darkened. Then we deal with Shaw directly. Prepare a contingency file on his activities since his discharge. Focus on his finances and foreign contacts. As Xavier departed, Dominic unlocked a hidden compartment in his desk and removed a small, leather-bound notebook. Inside were handwritten coordinates, codes, and names, a physical record of certain operations that would never exist in digital form. He found the page he sought and made a brief notation. Shaw active. Countermeasures authorized. The final pieces of his architectural design were falling into place. Hargrove would be destroyed professionally and legally. Brooke would be left alone with her child, her career compromised, her family fortune gone, forced to live with the consequences of her betrayal. And if Shaw had truly re-entered the game, Dominic would ensure his former commander regretted that decision profoundly. Chapter 7. The First Domino. The call came at 3:17 a.m., pulling Dominic from a light sleep. Xavier's voice was tense despite his attempt at professional calm. Sir, Hargrove took the bait. He met with Sheen's representative tonight and agreed to perform an off-the-book surgery on one of their associates with a gunshot wound. The entire conversation was recorded. Dominic sat up, instantly alert. Where's the patient? There isn't one. It was a test of Hargrove's willingness. He's scheduled to perform the fictional procedure tomorrow night. And Brooke? Home with the child. Our surveillance indicates she's unaware of Hargrove's arrangement, though she knows he met with business associates tonight. Dominic processed this information. Has the DEA been notified? Anonymous tips sent 30 minutes ago with Hargrove's location for tomorrow night and partial details of the arrangement. They're mobilizing a surveillance team now. Good. And Shaw, still in contact with Hargrove. He's increased his offer to $500,000 for information on Yemen. Hargrove is fabricating documents using information he's gleaned from news sources and his conversations with Brooke. Dominic's jaw tightened. The fabrications wouldn't be dangerous to national security. Hargrove didn't have access to actual classified material, but the attempt itself was enough to trigger federal interest in counterintelligence circles. Execute Phase 2, Component B, he ordered. Route the fabricated communications through the implanted channels. Ensure they're discoverable by the counterintelligence sweep that will follow the DEA raid. Already underway, Xavier confirmed. There's one more development. Hargrove attempted to access your ex-wife's Portland general credentials again last night, presumably to divert more pharmaceuticals, but the password had been changed. This was unexpected. Brooke changed her password? Yes, sir. And there's more. She's contacted Dr. Leslie Porterback at Seattle Memorial about reinstating her position there. Dominic absorbed this information thoughtfully. Brooke was creating distance between herself and Hargrove sooner than anticipated. It spoke to her intelligence. She sensed the sinking ship and was preparing to abandon it. I want audio surveillance in their apartment increased, he decided. If they're discussing separation, I need to know exactly what Brooke knows about Hargrove's activities. The next 24 hours unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Dominic monitored developments from his command center at Phantom Security, where multiple screens displayed surveillance feeds, intelligence reports, and the movements of key players. At 7:15 p.m., Hargrove left the Portland apartment after an argument with Brooke that surveillance had captured with crystal clarity. "Where are you going?" Brooke had demanded, the baby crying in the background. "Business meeting." "Don't wait up." "Business? You mean more gambling? Or are you meeting those men who broke your finger?" "This is different. I found a way to clear the debts. All of them." "By doing what exactly?" "Because if it's illegal, Liam, I swear I'll take Alexander and leave tonight." "It's just a consultation. Medical advice for a private client. Completely legitimate." "Then why are you sweating? And why can't you look me in the eye?" Hargrove had grabbed his medical bag then, his voice hardening. "Because you've done nothing but question and undermine me since we got here. At least Dominic. Don't you dare say his name in this house." "Fine. Enjoy your moral high ground while I try to keep a roof over our heads." The door had slammed, and Brooke was left alone with a crying infant. At 8:43 p.m., Hargrove arrived at an abandoned medical clinic on Portland's east side, a location chosen by Sheen's representative and now surrounded by unmarked DEA vehicles. At 9:17 p.m., Hargrove entered the building carrying his medical bag, now containing surgical supplies he'd stolen from Portland General. At 9:22 p.m., DEA agents stormed the building, arresting Hargrove along with two undercover operatives posing as Sheen's men. Dominic watched the arrest feed with cold satisfaction. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as designed. Within hours, the contents of Hargrove's laptop would be discovered, revealing both his illegal pharmaceutical activities and his fabricated communications with foreign entities interested in classified U.S. operations. "Sir," Xavier interrupted his contemplation. Brooke Vance just received a call from the Portland Police Department informing her of her partner's arrest. "Show me," Dominic ordered. The surveillance feed from the Portland apartment appeared on the main screen. Brooke stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, her face a mask of shock and building anger. "Conspiracy to distribute controlled substances?" she repeated to the officer on the line. "There must be some mistake. Liam is a cardiologist. He doesn't." She stopped, her expression changing as realization dawned. "Yes, I understand. No, I have no knowledge of any illegal activities. Of course I'll cooperate fully." After hanging up, she didn't cry. Instead, she moved with surprising efficiency, pulling a suitcase from the closet and beginning to pack essential items for herself and the baby. "She's running," Xavier observed. "Not running," Dominic corrected. "Extracting herself. There's a difference." He watched as Brooke made another call to her friend Leslie in Seattle. From the one-sided conversation they could monitor, Brooke was asking to stay with Leslie temporarily while sorting things out. This was proceeding faster than Dominic had calculated. He needed to adjust the timeline. "Implement Phase 3 immediately," he instructed Xavier. "I want the financial evidence delivered to Brooke before she leaves Portland." Phase 3 involved ensuring Brooke received documented evidence of Hargrove's extensive betrayals, not just his criminal activities, but evidence of his using her medical credentials without her knowledge, putting her license at risk, his attempt to sell information about Dominic to both Weiss and Shaw, and most damaging, his communications with other women while Brooke was pregnant. The evidence would devastate any remaining loyalty she might feel toward Hargrove. It would ensure that when he inevitably attempted to implicate her in his crimes, she would reject him completely. And in her vulnerable state, isolated from family support due to the Davidsons' financial collapse, she would be forced to rebuild her life with the knowledge that she had destroyed her secure future with Dominic for a man who had betrayed her just as thoroughly. "There's one more thing," Dominic added. "Contact Tessa. I want the trust fund for the child established immediately." Xavier looked surprised. "Sir, The boy is innocent in this, Dominic stated flatly. Set up the irrevocable trust as planned. $2 million accessible when he turns 25, provided he has no contact with Hargrove. Brooke is to be notified of its existence, but given no control over the funds. 2 hours later, a courier delivered a package to Brooke's apartment. The surveillance feed showed her opening it, her hands trembling slightly as she reviewed the contents. The documentation was comprehensive, leaving no doubt about the extent of Hargrove's deceptions. Her face transformed as she read, shock giving way to disgust, then hardening into cold fury. When she reached the final document, notification of the trust fund for Alexander, her composure finally broke. She sank onto the couch, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Send the final communication to the counterintelligence team, Dominic instructed, turning away from the feed. And activate our source at the Federal Detention Center. I want to know the moment Shaw attempts contact with Hargrove. The machinery of destruction was now fully in motion. Hargrove would face federal charges for multiple felonies. His medical career was over. His freedom would soon follow. Brooke was left to rebuild from ruins, her betrayal rewarded with isolation and the knowledge that she had sacrificed a loyal husband for a man who had used her just as ruthlessly. And Shaw would soon learn that awakening old vendettas against Dominic Vance carried consequences beyond imagination. That night, alone in his penthouse, Dominic reviewed the day's developments with detached analysis. Protocol Ares was proceeding as designed, yet he felt no sense of triumph or satisfaction. Revenge, he reflected, was not about emotional gratification. It was about restoring balance to a universe where betrayal had disrupted the natural order. His phone chimed with a secure message from Vincent Maddox. Shaw hunting actively. Watcher 6. Dominic acknowledged the warning with a curt reply, then moved to the window overlooking the Seattle skyline. Somewhere in Portland, Brooke was packing to leave the life she had chosen over him. Somewhere in federal custody, Hargrove was beginning to understand the architect of his destruction. And somewhere in the shadows, Robert Shaw was making his next move in a game he didn't realize Dominic had been playing for months. The first domino had fallen precisely as designed. The cascade that followed would be spectacular in its inevitability. Chapter 8. The Point of No Return. 3 weeks after Hargrove's arrest, Dominic sat across from FBI Special Agent Diana Rodriguez in a secure conference room at the Seattle Federal Building. Their conversation was officially off the record, a professional courtesy extended to Dominic based on his company's history of cooperation with federal authorities. "Let me be clear, Mr. Vance," Rodriguez said, her dark eyes scrutinizing his face for any reaction. "We have reason to believe Robert Shaw has been attempting to acquire classified information about your company's Yemen operation. The evidence points to Dr. Hargrove as his primary contact." Dominic maintained his composed expression. "That's concerning, Agent Rodriguez. My company takes national security extremely seriously. Indeed, which is why I'm here instead of a team with a warrant." She slid a folder across the table. Hargrove's communications with Shaw were discovered during the DEA investigation. He was attempting to fabricate intelligence to sell. Fabricate? Dominic raised an eyebrow. "So, there was no actual breach?" "Correct. But Shaw doesn't know that. He believes Hargrove has genuine information and is holding out for more money." Dominic studied the transcripts of communications between Hargrove and Shaw. They were exactly what his team had planted, convincing enough to implicate both men without revealing actual classified information. "What's your interest in Shaw?" Dominic asked, though he knew the answer. Rodriguez's expression hardened slightly. "We've had him under surveillance since his discharge. There are concerns about his foreign contacts, specifically in certain Middle Eastern countries hostile to U.S. interests. You think he's selling information to foreign intelligence services?" "We know he is," Rodriguez confirmed. "What we don't know is how he's obtaining it. Hargrove may be fabricating, but Shaw has sold genuine intelligence in the past." Dominic closed the folder and slid it back. "How can I assist your investigation, Agent Rodriguez?" She studied him carefully. "Shaw has requested a meeting with you. He claims it's about a potential security contract for his private consulting firm. And you want me to take this meeting? With appropriate protections in place, yes. We need to understand what he's really after. Dominic appeared to consider this request, though his decision had been made the moment she mentioned Shaw's name. I'll need complete operational discretion. My security team remains in place throughout. Of course, she agreed quickly. This would be a professional courtesy on your part, not an official operation. After establishing parameters for the meeting, to be held at Phantom Security's offices with both FBI and Dominic security monitoring, Rodriguez stood to leave. One more thing, Mr. Vance, she said at the door. We're aware of your history with Shaw. If this is personal for you, now's the time to say so. Dominic met her gaze directly. All security matters are professional, Agent Rodriguez. Personal feelings have no place in this line of work. She nodded, clearly not believing him but accepting the response. The meeting is set for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Shaw believes it's a private business discussion. He has no knowledge of our involvement. After she departed, Dominic contacted Xavier. Shaw's coming here tomorrow. Coordinate with the FBI surveillance team, but our people maintain primary security positions. Understood, Xavier replied. Should we implement Protocol Hydra? Dominic considered the question carefully. Protocol Hydra was designed specifically for encounters with Shaw, a comprehensive recording and tracking system that would document every word, every movement, every electronic signature. It went far beyond standard security measures. Yes, full implementation. And Xavier, sir, ensure our secure room is prepared. If Shaw reveals anything of substance, we may need a more private venue for continued discussions. The following day, Robert Shaw arrived precisely at 2 p.m., looking every bit the successful private security consultant he purported to be. His military bearing remained evident in his posture and calculated movements, but his expensive suit and carefully maintained silver hair projected affluence and legitimacy. Dominic greeted him in the main conference room, maintaining a professional demeanor despite the history between them. Colonel Shaw, he acknowledged. It's been some time. Not Colonel anymore. Shaw corrected with a tight smile. Just Robert now. Or Bob to my clients. What can Phantom Security do for you? Bob. Shaw settled into a chair, declining the offered coffee. I'll be direct, Dominic. My firm has secured a contract to provide security consultation for several energy companies expanding into the Yemeni market. Your work there last year was impressive. I'm hoping we might discuss a potential collaboration. Dominic noted the careful phrasing, technically accurate but deliberately vague. Yemen is a complicated operational theater. What specific aspects of our work interested you? Your extraction protocols, primarily. I understand you developed some innovative approaches to secure transit through contested territories. And there it was, the fishing expedition, thinly disguised as professional interest. Those extraction protocols were classified, developed in conjunction with U.S. intelligence agencies. Our methodologies are proprietary, Dominic replied evenly. Though I'm curious how you became aware of them, given the confidential nature of that operation. Shaw's smile didn't waver. Our industry runs on information, Dominic. You know that better than most. Indeed, including information about who's been attempting to purchase classified intelligence from disgraced physicians. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Shaw's expression hardened, though his posture remained relaxed. I'm not sure what you're implying. No implication. Simple fact. Dr. Liam Hargrove has been quite forthcoming with federal investigators about your generous offers for information regarding Phantom's Yemen operations. Shaw's eyes narrowed fractionally, the only indication that Dominic's direct approach had surprised him. If some desperate doctor in legal trouble is making accusations, I'd hardly consider that reliable intelligence. The Federal Counterintelligence Team has documentation of your communications. Quite detailed documentation. For several seconds, silence filled the room as Shaw recalculated his position. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted to one of quiet intensity. Let's be honest with each other, Dominic. We both know what this is really about. Syria. Operation Cerberus. Ancient history, Dominic replied dismissively. Not to me, Shaw countered, leaning forward slightly. Your testimony destroyed my career. Everything I'd built over 3 decades. Gone because you couldn't follow orders. I followed lawful orders. I didn't participate in a cover-up of civilian casualties. Shaw's controlled facade cracked slightly, revealing the rage beneath. Those casualties were tragic but unavoidable. The mission objective was paramount. You knew that when you accepted the assignment. The mission was compromised from the start. Your intelligence was flawed, your operational plan was reckless, and your response to the consequences was criminal. Criminal? Shaw scoffed. I was cleared of all charges. On technicalities, not on merit. The two men stared at each other, years of unresolved animosity crystallizing in the silence between them. You know, Shaw finally said, his voice dangerously soft, I've spent years wondering what would hurt you most. When I heard about your divorce, the paternity scandal, the public humiliation, I thought perhaps I'd found my answer. But watching you now, I realize it wasn't enough. Dominic's expression remained impassive, though his awareness heightened at this revelation. You've been monitoring my personal life. With great interest, Shaw confirmed. Particularly your methodical destruction of Dr. Hargrove. Very impressive work. Almost worthy of what I taught you in Syria. You taught me nothing except the cost of compromised leadership. Shaw laughed quietly. Is that what you tell yourself? That you're different from me? Better. He shook his head. Look in the mirror, Dominic. The way you've systematically destroyed your ex-wife and her lover. That's not justice. That's vengeance executed with military precision. If you came here to psychoanalyze me, you've wasted both our time. I came here to propose a truce, actually. Shaw reached inside his jacket, causing Xavier to tense visibly in the corner of the room. Shaw removed not a weapon, but a small flash drive, placing it on the table between them. This contains evidence of every surveillance operation you've conducted against your ex-wife and Dr. Hargrove, including several that arguably crossed legal boundaries. Enough to destroy Phantom Security's reputation and possibly result in criminal charges against you personally. Dominic didn't look at the drive, and in exchange for not releasing this supposed evidence, access to your Yemen protocols, the real ones, not whatever sanitized version you provide to clients. The audacity of the proposal was almost admirable. Shaw was attempting to leverage Dominic's personal vendetta to extract classified information. An elegant trap that demonstrated why the man had once been one of the military's most effective special operations commanders. That's an interesting proposal, Dominic said after a calculated pause, though it makes certain assumptions that may not be accurate, such as that I care about reputation more than principle, that I conducted any surveillance that wasn't fully legal. And most importantly, Dominic leaned forward, meeting Shaw's gaze directly, that you're in a position to threaten me at all. Shaw's confident expression faltered slightly, meaning that while we've been having this conversation, federal agents have been executing a search warrant at your Bellevue residence and your office in Tacoma. They're particularly interested in your encrypted communications with certain foreign nationals in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. That's impossible, Shaw said, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. You couldn't know about your meetings with Fareed al-Nazari last month in Vancouver? Or perhaps your encrypted communications with Iranian intelligence using Hargrove as a cutout. I know everything, Robert. I've known for months. Shaw's composure shattered completely. You set me up. This entire meeting was a courtesy, actually, Dominic interrupted. A professional courtesy to allow you the dignity of surrender rather than arrest. The FBI is waiting outside this room. Agent Rodriguez has authorized me to inform you that cooperation now will be considered favorably during prosecution. For a moment, Dominic thought Shaw might attempt something desperate, his military training taking over in a fight-or-flight response. But decades of discipline prevailed, and Shaw regained control of his expression. This isn't over, he said quietly. Actually, it is, Dominic replied, standing to signal the end of the meeting. It's been over since Syria. You just didn't know it yet. As FBI agents entered to take Shaw into custody, he looked back at Dominic one final time. We're the same, you and I. Remember that when you're sleeping in your fortress of righteousness. Dominic watched him passively as Shaw was led away. After the room cleared, Xavier approached with a tablet displaying multiple surveillance feeds. The FBI team has secured evidence at both locations, he reported. Agent Rodriguez sends her compliments on your cooperation. What about the other matter? Dominic asked. Confirmed. Shaw has been monitoring your ex-wife and Hargrove. He had operatives following their movements in Portland and Seattle. This development would need to be addressed. If Shaw had been surveilling Brooke and the child, others might be as well. Dominic had eliminated 2 threats to his former family, but there could be others, associates of Shaw or Hargrove seeking leverage or revenge. Implement Protocol Sentinel, he decided. Covert protection detail for Brooke and the child. They're not to know they're being watched. Xavier nodded, understanding the apparent contradiction. Despite everything, Dominic was extending protection to the woman who had betrayed him and a child that wasn't his. But Xavier had served with Dominic long enough to understand that his moral code, while brutal in its application, remained consistent in its principles. Later that evening, Dominic received a final report on Shaw's arrest. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Not just the fabricated communications with Hargrove that Dominic had orchestrated, but genuine evidence of espionage that the FBI had been building for years. Shaw would likely spend the rest of his life in federal prison. The satisfaction Dominic expected to feel remained elusive. He had systematically destroyed everyone who had betrayed or threatened him. Brooke, Hargrove, and now Shaw. Yet something remained unresolved, a loose thread in his architectural design. His phone chimed with a message from Xavier. B has returned to Seattle. Taken position at Memorial. Child in daycare during working hours. Security protocols in place. Brooke had completed her extraction from the ruins of her relationship with Hargrove, returning to the city where her betrayal had begun. The elegant symmetry of this development struck Dominic as appropriate. She would live in the shadow of her mistakes, reminded daily of the life she had discarded. Yet even this knowledge brought no sense of completion. The architecture of his revenge was perfect in its design and execution, but the structure itself felt oddly hollow. Vincent's words from weeks earlier echoed in his mind. You're building a house of cards in a hurricane. Perhaps the flaw wasn't in the design, but in the purpose. Perhaps revenge, no matter how perfectly executed, could never restore what betrayal had destroyed. Dominic dismissed the thought as weakness and returned to reviewing the security protocols for Brooke and the child. His personal feelings were irrelevant. What mattered was ensuring that his architectural design was complete, that everyone who had betrayed him understood the consequences of their actions. The final phase would ensure that understanding was absolute and irrevocable. Chapter 9. The Architect's Legacy. 5 years passed. Dominic Vance stood at the window of his Kyoto hotel suite, watching cherry blossoms swirl in the spring breeze. Phantom Security had expanded globally, with operations now spanning 4 continents and a client list that included governments, corporations, and high-net-worth individuals requiring the ultimate in security services. His phone vibrated with a message from Xavier. Annual report prepared as requested. The annual report was Dominic's code for the yearly update on the subjects of Protocol Ares. Though the active phases of his architectural design had concluded years ago, he maintained surveillance on the key players, not from any emotional attachment, but from the same strategic thoroughness that characterized all his operations. Opening the encrypted file, Dominic reviewed the status updates. Liam Hargrove, serving year 5 of a 15-year federal sentence for narcotics distribution, fraud, and attempted espionage. 2 appeals denied. Prison informants report declining health due to unmanaged gambling addiction leading to deaths within the prison population. No visitors in the past 17 months. Robert Shaw, serving life sentence in ADX Florence for espionage. Denied communication with outside world except monitored legal counsel. Recent petition for medical transfer denied. Helena Davidson, deceased stroke 14 months ago. Boston estate sold to cover debts. Husband remains in specialized care facility, funded by state program following bankruptcy. Brooke Vance, now Brooke Davidson, Resumed maiden name chief resident in cardiothoracic surgery at Johns Hopkins. Relocated from Seattle 2 years ago. Limited social life. No romantic relationships of significance. Maintains minimal contact with former Seattle colleagues. Alexander Davidson, age 5. Enrolled in private school in Baltimore. Performing above grade level academically. Trust fund maintained at $2.7 million with investments performing as projected. The report continued with details of Brooke's career progression, financial status, and social connections. Her life had stabilized after the collapse of her relationship with Hargrove, though she remained isolated. Her former social circle in Seattle had largely abandoned her after the scandal, and her family's financial ruin had eliminated the safety net she had always taken for granted. Dominic closed the file, his expression unchanged. The destruction he had architected was complete and irreversible. Hargrove would likely die in prison. Shaw's betrayal of his country had earned him a lifetime in the most secure federal facility in America. Brooke had rebuilt a career, but lived a solitary existence, far from her former life of privilege and connection. Justice, by his definition, had been served. A knock at the door interrupted his reflection. Vincent Maddox entered, looking older but still carrying himself with military precision despite now being in his 60s. "Still tracking them?" Vincent asked, noting the encrypted file on Dominic's tablet. Maintaining situational awareness, Dominic corrected. Vincent shook his head. 5 years, Dominic. Time to close the file. The operation remains active. Bullshit, Vincent said bluntly. There's no operation. Just a man who can't let go of the past. Dominic's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. I've let go. This is merely verification of outcomes. Then why maintain the protection detail on the woman and her son? Why the trust fund for a child that isn't yours? Strategic considerations, Dominic replied, though the answer sounded hollow even to his own ears. Vincent poured himself a drink from the hotel bar. You know what your problem is? You achieved everything you set out to do, destroyed everyone who betrayed you, and still you're not satisfied. Satisfaction was never the objective. Then what was? Vincent challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you've spent 5 years perfecting a revenge that brought you no peace. Dominic didn't answer immediately. The cherry blossoms outside continued their graceful descent, beautiful even in their falling. They needed to understand the consequences, he finally said. And did they? Does Hargrove, wasting away in federal prison, understand your architectural brilliance? Does Brooke, living her solitary life in Baltimore, appreciate the elegant design of her punishment? Dominic turned from the window. What's your point, Vincent? My point is that you built a perfect machine of destruction, and now you can't turn it off. You're trapped in your own design. Vincent set down his glass. I'm not saying they didn't deserve what they got. I'm saying you deserve to be free of it. I am free. Are you? When's the last time you had a relationship? Built anything that wasn't a security system or a revenge plot? Christ, Dominic, you're 45 years old and living like you're still operating behind enemy lines. The assessment hit closer to home than Dominic cared to admit. In the years since Brooke's betrayal, he had poured himself into phantom security and the execution of his revenge. The company had thrived, but his personal life remained as militarily Spartan as his former SEAL quarters. I have what I need, he stated flatly. Vincent sighed. You have what you think you deserve, which isn't the same thing. He moved toward the door. Your car's waiting. The Matsuhira meeting is in an hour. After Vincent departed, Dominic remained by the window, uncharacteristically reflective. The yearly reports had become a ritual, a moment to confirm that the architecture of his revenge remained intact. Yet each year, the satisfaction diminished further. Perhaps Vincent was right. Perhaps the true prison wasn't the one holding Hargrove or Shaw, but the one Dominic had constructed around himself. A fortress of righteous vengeance that protected him from betrayal, but also from connection. He picked up his phone and composed a message to Xavier. Terminate Protocol Sentinel. Archive all surveillance on Davidson, B, and Davidson, A. Maintain trust fund administration only. The response came immediately, confirmed. Protection detail to be withdrawn by end of week. Are you certain? Dominic stared at the question for a long moment. Was he certain? The protection detail had been his one remaining connection to Brooke and the child. A tenuous thread justified as security, but perhaps serving a different purpose entirely. Confirmed, he replied. Time to close the file. 6 months later, Dominic was reviewing expansion plans for Phantom's European operations when his secure line rang, a line known to fewer than 10 people worldwide. It's Vincent, came the familiar voice. There's a situation you need to know about. Dominic tensed slightly. Vincent's tone carried an urgency he hadn't heard in years. Go ahead. Hargrove is dead. Suicide in his cell 2 days ago. But before he died, he sent letters. One to federal prosecutors offering new testimony against Shaw, and one to Brooke. Contents: unknown, but she's been making inquiries about you since receiving it. Discreet but persistent inquiries. Dominic processed this information with his usual calculating efficiency. Any indication of threat assessment? None. My source says she's been asking about your current operations, your security protocols. Professional curiosity, not personal vendetta. Maintain distance, Dominic decided. No engagement. There's more, Vincent continued. The boy, Alexander. He's been hospitalized in Baltimore. Rare blood disorder requiring specialized treatment. Prognosis: guarded. The condition requires a specific type of bone marrow transplant. Given his rare blood type, finding a compatible donor has been difficult. The rare blood type, AB negative with the Bombay phenotype. 1 in 5 million. The same type that had confirmed Hargrove's paternity 5 years ago. Is Hargrove's tissue sample still viable for donation? Dominic asked, already knowing the answer. No, and with his death, that option is gone. The doctors are searching international registries, but the rarity makes matching extremely difficult. Dominic fell silent, his mind calculating possibilities with familiar precision. The architectural design of his revenge had been perfect in every detail, except this unforeseen consequence. A child, innocent of his parents' betrayal, now suffering because the mechanism of justice had removed his biological father from the equation. Send me the medical details, Dominic finally said, and have my jet prepared. You're going to Baltimore? Vincent sounded surprised. Why? Verification of outcomes, Dominic replied, using his own terminology. But as he ended the call, he recognized the inadequacy of that explanation. This wasn't about verification. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. It was about something he had overlooked in his perfect architectural design. The possibility that destruction, no matter how justified, could never create the foundation for what might come after. 3 days later, Dominic sat across from Brooke in a small consultation room at Johns Hopkins Hospital. She looked older, the stress of recent years evident in the fine lines around her eyes, but her posture retained the confidence he had once admired. I didn't expect you to come, she said, studying him with a surgeon's analytical gaze. I maintain awareness of significant developments, he replied neutrally. You mean you've been watching us? All these years? It wasn't a question. Yes. She nodded, unsurprised. I knew it was you funding the security detail. The men were too good, too professional to be standard hospital security. It was a precaution. Shaw had people monitoring you. And now? Why are you here now, Dominic? He met her gaze directly. I understand Alexander needs a bone marrow transplant. That his blood type makes finding a donor difficult. Her professional composure cracked slightly, revealing the mother beneath the surgeon. Nearly impossible. We've searched every registry. His condition is deteriorating, and we're running out of time. Dominic placed a file on the table between them. My security firm maintains extensive medical databases on individuals with rare blood markers. Potential donors in case of emergency extraction scenarios. Hope flickered in her eyes. You found a match? Potentially. The individual has agreed to testing. Why would you do this? Brooke asked, suspicion replacing hope. After everything, Dominic considered her question carefully. The truth was complex, layered with contradictions even he didn't fully understand. His revenge had been perfect in its execution, but hollow in its aftermath. The architect had created destruction with flawless precision, but failed to consider what might be built from the ruins. The child is innocent, he said simply. My issue was never with him. Brooke studied him, searching for the calculation she expected to find. And what do you want in return? Nothing. I don't believe you, she said flatly. You never do anything without a purpose, without a plan 10 steps ahead. Perhaps, Dominic acknowledged. But plans change. Priorities shift. She looked down at the medical file, conflict evident in her expression. Liam wrote to me before he died. He confessed everything. How you orchestrated his destruction, how you manipulated evidence against him. Did he mention using your medical credentials to divert pharmaceuticals? Putting your license at risk? Attempting to sell fabricated intelligence to a man who would have used it to endanger American operatives? No, she admitted. He portrayed himself as your victim. Nothing else. And what do you believe? Her eyes met his again, clear and direct. I believe you're both architects of destruction. He built his on lies and desperation. You built yours on calculated precision. Neither of you considered the collateral damage. Dominic absorbed this assessment without visible reaction, though he recognized its accuracy. His revenge had been justifiable, but absolute. A scorched earth response that eliminated the immediate threat, but left nothing capable of growth in its wake. The potential donor will arrive tomorrow, he said, standing to leave. My medical team will coordinate with your doctors. Wait, Brooks said, rising as well. There's something else I need to know. The trust fund for Alexander, why? As I said, the child is innocent. It's more than that, she pressed. You've maintained surveillance, security details, financial support, all for a child that isn't yours, born from a betrayal you never forgave. Why? Dominic had asked himself the same question during sleepless nights in hotel rooms across the globe. The architecture of his revenge had accounted for every variable except one: his own inability to completely sever the connection to what might have been. Perhaps I wanted to ensure that something survived, he finally said. Something untainted by what happened between us. Brooks' expression softened slightly, the first hint of the woman he had once loved. And has it worked? Has anything survived? We'll know tomorrow, he replied, his usual precision failing him. The bone marrow donation was successful. The anonymous donor, arranged through Dominic's extensive network, provided the life-saving cells Alexander needed. 3 months later, the child was in remission, his prognosis excellent. Dominic received the medical updates with his customary detachment, filing them alongside the final reports on Protocol Ares. Shaw remained in federal prison, his health declining. Hargrove was buried in an unmarked grave, his parents having disowned him years earlier. The architecture of destruction was complete. Yet something had changed in Dominic. Vincent noticed it first, a subtle shift in focus from security operations to the Phantom Foundation, the charitable arm of his company that now funded medical research into rare blood disorders and support programs for children affected by them. Building instead of destroying, Vincent observed during a rare moment of reflection. It suits you better than I expected. Dominic didn't acknowledge the observation directly. The foundation serves strategic purposes: reputation management, networking opportunities. Of course, Vincent agreed, not believing it for a moment. Nothing to do with a certain child in Baltimore who's alive because of your intervention. 1 year after Alexander's successful treatment, Dominic received a package at his Seattle office. Inside was a handwritten note from Brooke and a child's drawing. A simple house with blue walls and a red roof, surrounded by flowering trees and a bright sun. The note read simply. He asked about the man who found his donor. I told him you were an architect who builds instead of destroys. He wanted you to have this. His first creation. Dominic studied the drawing with uncharacteristic attention to detail, noting the careful lines, the deliberate color choices, the emerging skill of a young mind finding its first expression. Then he did something he hadn't done in nearly 7 years. He smiled. The architect had designed perfect destruction, but perhaps his true legacy would be what others built from the ruins he left behind. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.